Hello there, and welcome to this, your latest Euractiv virtual event. This time we're going to be talking all about transport and how sustainable transport can be a future option for the European Union, especially as we move towards the 2050 climate neutrality target that the EU has in place. Let's take account of where we stand at the moment. Transport accounts for about a quarter of the EU's greenhouse gas emissions. And unlike sectors like energy generation and so on, those emissions are actually growing, and we offer up some amazing challenges as to where we can actually curb those emissions. Today, you can actually say that this event is extremely well timed because the European Commission has published its Sustainable and Smart Mobility Strategy, an overarching Green Deal-esque look at transport and where it's going. And there is a huge amount of content that we are able to go through over the next hour or so. Where do we stand, though? The new climate law and all of its effects on the European Union will mean that huge emission cuts will have to happen. That includes things like ensuring that vehicles on our roads are zero emissions, high-speed rail is used more and more, freight is taken by inland waterways and rail instead of road transport, and so on and so forth. Zero-emission aircraft and things like this. It's an exciting time to be in transport, basically. And what better way to go through all of this than to introduce some experts to you who can actually guide us through these issues. And I'm going to start with them now. To introduce you, Axel Walker from the European Commission. You are team leader for Clean Transport at the Director General for Transport. You are stepping in at very short notice due to illness of one of your colleagues, and we thank you very much for being here. Then we have Catherine Chabot, who is a member of the European Parliament, who sits on the ENVI committee. Thank you very much for joining us, Catherine. Carlos Calvo Ambel then joins us, Senior Director at Clean Mobility Group, Transport and Environment. And I think we also have Marianne Marinescu, a member of the TRAN committee as well, who is joining us. We do have some technical gremlins vexing us today. Julie Kestrup, who is head of EU affairs at Danfoss, who is kindly supporting this event today, can't join us at the moment, but hopefully we can get her online later to talk to all of you. Before I hand you over to our panel to give us the opening statements and their views on transport and where we're going, just a few housekeeping rules. You can tweet along with us at #EADebates. Please do get your comments in there. And you can also ask questions to the panelists, and we'll try to give as much time as possible for that later. Please use the Q&A function of the platform you're using rather than the chat, and we will do our best to get to all of your questions in due course. That's it from me at the moment. I'll hand over to you now, Axel. Like I said, we could either say that this event is extremely well timed because the mobility strategy has just been published, or it should be in about 2 hours when we can read all through it and see the details. So maybe you can enlighten us with a bit of the detail yourself. So here we go. The floor is yours for 5 or so minutes to tell us all about this strategy.
Thank you, Samuel, and good afternoon, everyone. I hope that you can clearly understand me and that we don't have any connection issues. As you say, Samuel, it's an exciting time. It's an exciting day for transport. We have just seen the adoption of our new sustainable and smart mobility strategy earlier today. And this strategy is really the outcome of a long discussion process that the Commission has had with basically all transport stakeholders. So we see it really as the foundation for a discussion of all sort of key transport system stakeholders on how we can approach the transition that is ahead of us. And I think when we speak about the transition, we are basically looking at 3 parallel transition processes, because we have to ensure that we master the green transition, that we master the digital transition, and that the transport sector, the transport system as such, also becomes more resilient to external shocks. Now, you have seen probably that the transport strategy picks up the commitment from the European Green Deal communication earlier on, that transport has to reduce its emission about 90% by 2050. And to go there, it is really a needed effort from all the modes of transport and from basically everyone. So we are trying to illustrate this need through 10 key action areas. And in these 10 key action areas, we have identified 82 initiatives that the Commission will bring forward in the next couple of years to help achieve this transition. And these 82 initiatives are sort of enshrined in the action plan that we have published today together with the Sustainable and Smart Mobility Strategy. Now, basically, when you have to overlook such a long-term time horizon, it's always good that you have signposts along the way, which is why we are setting up some key milestones for both 2030 and for 2050. And these should sort of help structure a debate, help structure the development of related policy initiatives that will come in the years ahead. And you will see that we have put forward a number of these milestones for road, for rail, for water, for aviation. I think we can discuss them in a minute. I think what is important to reflect here is indeed, we see a need for sort of gearing up the speed of change. So I think what we need now in view of this huge emission reduction need ahead is sort of acceleration of speed and also acceleration of the transformative nature of that speed. So we will have to master a rapid, accelerated uptake of zero-emission vehicles over the next 10 years. Our analysis suggests that we could have and should have probably around, for example, 30 million zero-emission cars on the road. And also when you look into 2050, it is sort of a milestone that we should have nearly all vehicles on zero emission. So this is just one of the things. But I mean, if you go through it, I mean, it's not only about sort of how many cars can we get on the road. It's really about making the transport system more sustainable, which is why a key priority is to really continue and extend our efforts to bring forward the rail networks. We want to double high-speed rail by 2030 and triple it by 2050. We want to put it on an equal footing with all other transport modes by 2030. And you will see that we are also now taking and would like to propose ambitious action for bringing forward action in waterborne and aviation transport. We really have to accelerate the ramp up, the use of sustainable alternative fuels. And we also hope that over the course of the next 10 and to 15 years, we really see the market readiness of zero emission ships and also large zero emission planes become a reality, so that we can then roll that out to help transition that sector in view of 2050 as well. So as you said, there's a lot of things to read. There will be even much more things in the next years to come to discuss in terms of the policy initiatives that will help implement this vision. But for today, I can come back to the beginning. This is the start of the discussion process. This is sort of the vision of the Commission, how we can lay the foundation for the transition in the transport system that is necessary. And rest assured, I think that is a key concluding statement. This needs to be a transition that leaves no one behind. I think the Commission has always been very clear that we remain with the principal objectives of inclusive, of affordable and accessible transport and mobility throughout the Union. So this will be a digital transition towards a more resilient transport system that really leaves no one behind. And I think I'll leave it here for the moment. Thank you.
Many thanks, Axel. And hi to Yuli as well. Glad that you could join us. Technical gremlins, I know they're the bane of virtual events these days, but we'll power through. Catherine, over to you now for your opening statement. Thank you for joining us. Tell us what take on this the sustainability drive in transport that we're seeing at the moment.
Hey, thank you very much. And I hope you heard me because the sound is not really good for me. So, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for the invitation. You won't be surprised, I will speak about maritime transport. And first, I would like to share my personal experience. I have been able to discover the sea as a professional sailor, and the garbage I saw in the middle of the ocean made me realize the ocean was fragile. I felt a deep sense of individual and collective responsibility. And as a competitor, I worked on my boat to be the fastest one. And when I stopped racing after my second participation to the, the round the world race, single-handed one, the Vendée Globe, it was in 2000. I worked on a project of ship of the future, sailing boat of the future, to reduce the impacts on the sea from energy, materials, to waste and water management. And this innovative process is necessary for sustainable mobility. And today, I think technology transfer from sailing to shipping must be promoted, such as wind propulsion and better energy efficiency. In the post-COVID recovery context, I also support greater cooperation at the EU level. For example, with transnational projects such as Canopy. I don't know if you have heard of this project. It is a ship, with rigid wings that will carry the Ariane rockets, which was designed in France, built in Poland, by a shipyard from Netherlands with the help of Germany. So the EU has the capacities to become a sustainable mobility champion, including in maritime mobility, and should not wait for China or Japan to take this leadership. Now, some words about solutions for maritime transport transition. There are many possibilities to limit the impacts of maritime transport. I will give you 4 examples that are indispensable for me. First of all, we're investing in the European green ship industry, from eco-design ships to ships renovation and dismantlement. Don't forget this. I believe the recovery plan is an opportunity for the development of decarbonized technologies such as wind propulsion. Secondly, zero emission ports. Ports are privileged places for the production and storage of renewables and are developing circular economy strategies. A strategic approach to ports is essential for me, for example, to invest in refueling and recharging infrastructures. Third, encourage modal shifts. Zero-emission waterway transport is essential to develop a sustainable model. Shifts from roads to inland waterways. Modal shifts can also be based on maritime routes, with short sea shipping and the development of motorways of the sea. And fourth, the enlargement of ECA zones, limiting both sulfur and nitrogen emissions to all EU waters is also something I strongly call for. Finally, we have to be coherent with our objectives and policies. One cannot promote decarbonized transport while using Arctic roads to transport goods, because climate change opened these new ways. We certainly must avoid creating polar maritime highways to ensure sustainable transport. That's the end for me, but I will be happy to answer your questions after. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Catherine. I love the story about the Vendée Globe. Excellent. Marianne, I think you can hear us now. I hope we can hear you as well. Over to you for your opening statement. What do you think about all of this sustainability talk for transport? Is there a future there?
Yes, I hope that you can hear me.
We do.
Is it okay?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much. So, yes, there is we have a strategy now for mobility, sustainable mobility. And there are good directions, good proposals, but I think that the implementation will be very difficult because, first of all, we should need a lot of investment. So I would like to ask from DG if aside of this strategy, there is an impact assessment regarding the investment that is needed, at least up to 2030, and regarding the social side, which means jobs, what is going on with the jobs. And, we are speaking a lot about transport, but we have to speak also about infrastructure because we need to invest a lot in infrastructure. If we think only to the cars, to the road transport, I think the investment will be quite large. So there are some things that I don't think that there are, I don't know, coordinated. 75% on switch from road, but in the same time, you are saying that only 50% on rail up to 2030 and double to 2050. I don't think that these numbers are coordinated. Now, it's clear the ideas that are here, they are good. We know that there are not many variants to reach these targets, but we need technology. And for this, we need research and innovation. So we need money to be invested in joint undertakings and to came with technologies that could be applied in a very short period of time if we want to reach the target in 2030. So if we speak about each mode of transport, we can, I don't know, say some words what we should need in my opinion. This shift to rail and water is very good, but we need to have rail and we need to have water, because for the moment, the inland waterways is not developed at the level to receive more freight, more traffic. Even if you are it's said in the proposal that it will be, I don't know, 25% by 2030. First of all, I think it's not so much compared with the potential. But even this, I don't think that is possible if we do not invest in, especially in the main corridor. And I don't see anything done in the direction of harmonization of the technical and navigation rules, in the direction to update, to modernize to make better the canal, the navigable canal, and to make the ports multimodal, and so on. So there are a lot of things aside that should be developed in order to arrive to this. In rail, it's, in my opinion, the worst situation, because the rail is not developed at the level that we should want to be. We have a regulation about freight corridors since 7 years, nothing was done, and now we want in 10 years to do everything. High speed is not so developed, and high speed means more than 200 kilometers per hour. And I don't think that we should be able to accommodate more freight on the rail if we do not invest a lot. Think that ERTMS, it's a system that for the moment it's installed in under 20% of rail and is not interoperable even, because there are different types of, let's say, ERTMS. So we should have a program for, a coordinated program for ERTMS, at least the freight corridors to be in place. Aviation, we are speaking a lot about it. Single sky is not, now we are speaking about it, but the member states are not willing to do it. And nothing about replacing the old planes, because the technology in aviation changed a lot, but we need to replace the planes. And so on. We can speak a lot about other modes, but I think that should be enough for the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Marianne. Yeah, a lot of content to get through, actually. Carlos, I guess you've been extremely busy over the last hour or so, checking out the strategy for differences between the ones you've seen before and everything. Give us your take on what you think, what the Commission's come out with. Do you think it's a good vision for the future, or there are things that need to be improved? Over to you.
Hello to the audience, and thank you, Samuel, for the introduction, and thank you for the invitation to be here today. Indeed, I mean, we have seen that everyone else, some of the previous keys to the sustainable and smart mobility strategy, but indeed there has been some changes, so we were actually going through them. But I think that something is clear. The strategy presented today by the Commission, by the move more specifically, it represents progress. It definitely represents a big step in comparison to previous strategies from the Commission, particularly the 2011 white paper. For instance, something that Mr. Marinescu was talking about aviation and shipping, there seems to be a push away from fossil fuels for both sectors, which is something that we welcome, something very positive. However, when we go to the details of the staff working document, which is basically the technical report that supports the political document, it seems that by 2030, an important part of the alternative fuels that could be used in both aviation and shipping could come from biofuels. And that's something that we are worried about, because, I mean, we all know the biofuels disaster that we have experienced in the last decade and a half in Europe that basically drove deforestation worldwide. Somehow we were surprised that, at least for alternative fuels for aviation and shipping, that there were no clear references to green hydrogen-based fuels, particularly because in the strategy in July, the Commission's hydrogen strategy, there was a clear pledge to support cleaner electrofuels, such as hydrogen or ammonia for ships and e-kerosene for planes. On road transport, the document talks about 30 million electric or zero-emission vehicles by 2030, which we did some quick calculations, and we estimate that it is compatible with the minus 50% CO2 standards for cars that was mentioned in the climate target plan like a couple of months ago. And it might be even go slightly beyond that minus 50%, which is positive because it's basically meaning an increase of the CO2 standards. However, we all know that we don't need a minus 50% to decarbonize cars in Europe. If we want to decarbonize them by 2050, we need something that is actually closer to minus 80%, as it was included in a report that was also presented last week by McKinsey, and that was launched in another Euractiv event where I also had the luck to participate. So I think that what we need overall, it's a clear vision. We need a clear vision. And I think we all know, also the Commission and also the, when you look into the long-term strategy of the climate target plan of the Commission, it's clear that we need to have, and it's also in the document that was presented today, in fact, that by 2050, we will only have zero-emission cars, for example. But if you back calculate how to get there by 2050, that means that the last internal combustion engine car needs to be sold by 2035 at the very latest. So minus 50% by 2030, it is not enough. If we just we'll have 5 more years maximum to sell the last petrol or diesel car. So how are we going to get there? How are we going to make sure that by 2050 we only have zero-emission vehicles in European roads? What policy tools are we planning to use? And that's something that we're missing from the strategy. There were, in the climate target plan, the previous Commission document, there were talks about considering a phase-out of internal combustion engine cars, and that's something that we are missing in the version that was published today. The same for aviation and shipping. We need close to 100% synthetic fuels produced from mostly green hydrogen. So if that's the vision, if that's where we're going, what is clear is that we should avoid getting distracted. We should not be talking about LNG for ships. LNG is a natural gas fuel. It's a fossil fuel, so therefore it doesn't help to actually decarbonize. I mean, from a climate point of view, it's basically as bad as other shipping fuels. We should not be distracted by biofuels. We don't have decades and decades to make mistakes and then try to fix them. We basically have 3 more decades to try to 2050 with a decarbonized transport system. If we start deviating and implementing like so-called transition technologies, we're not going to make it, especially for sectors like aviation and shipping, where the renewal time of the fleet is extremely long. So basically, I will just conclude by saying that we need a clear vision of where we're going. I think that's something that we agree with the Commission. We need to go towards transport decarbonization, or at least minus 90%. That's the target. And I think that the document today, the strategy presented today, is a step in the right direction, but somehow it's missing, is somehow hesitating on putting clear measures on the table on how to get there. For instance, the fact that we are missing a phase-out date for petrol and diesel cars is a missed opportunity, but we should also take advantage of all the good measures that are in the document and keep making progress all together. Thank you.
Thank you, Carlos. Over to you now, Yuli. Thank you for joining us. Hope you're doing well. Where do you see transport going in the next up to 2050? Are we being sustainable enough as it is, or is there extra stuff that we need to do? Over to you for your statement.
Yeah. So first of all, apologies for my computer issues. My computer seems to be having an off day, so I think we will have some of those during this corona crisis. I think 2050, first of all, very excited to see the document out today by the Commission. It's quite clear that transport is the area that requires the most drastic uptake of technology if we are to become carbon neutral by 2050, but also just meet our Paris assignments. I mean, looking at the document as released today, just like everyone else, I've also feverishly gone through the updated version, and I think there are 3 points I'd like to focus on. I mean, the first one is around charging infrastructure, or just infrastructure in general, because it's quite clear that that is a major obstacle for uptake as it stands. This is what will decide whether we're in a positive or in a negative circle in terms of uptake. So we need to have a broader charge. We're excited to see a strong plan for that. And I think another thing that's really strong in this document is that, just like we saw, for instance, with the radiation wave, there is a real sort of interplay between what's happening here and what's happening in the renewables, in the EPBD, in energy systems integration strategy. That's really, really important, because if we don't break down these silos and look at everything from an overarching perspective, then on an area like transport, we're not going to get anywhere. Then I think the other thing that's really quite important from a transport perspective, and again is key in this document, is this sort of notion of this city aspect. we commissioned some data early in the year from Navigant that shows electron transport in urban areas can actually meet about 28% of the overall target to go towards Paris. And that again is a huge potential. And I think when we're talking cities, of course, we're talking about the on-road transport, but also some of the previous speakers have mentioned the maritime transport in the ports. And again, that's really important for decarbonization, but it's also really important for air pollution, which is a key issue. In fact, according to WHO, more than 91% of people worldwide live in cities with too high air pollution. And so I think when we're looking at transport here, we're talking about the emissions and we're talking about the impact on the air pollution. And that, of course, is very, very important to do something about. And again, when we talk about the maritime aspect of this, there are sort of two sides to it. There are the ports themselves and the electrification thereof, but also the actual sort of vessels. And at Danfoss, we've been involved in a number of projects on sort of a short distance ferries that are now sort of fully electrified. And again, there's a huge potential there that we need to branch into to make sure we get where we want to go. So I think just to take a step from all that, there is a huge task ahead of us. We've not done well on transport so far. I think we need to admit that. I think what the Commission has put forward here is a step in the right direction. I don't disagree with the previous speaker that maybe we should see even more ambition. But what I like here is that we're taking, or the Commission is taking a holistic approach. And that, I think, is the way forward, because we can't just take sort of a silo approach, picking one mode of transport at the time. We really need to go all in. And at all levels. And I think that's what the Commission attempts to do with this communication. And that, from my perspective, is a good starting point.
Fantastic. Thank you, Yuli. Thank you to all of you for your opening statements. Just to remind anyone watching at home that you can ask your questions. A few of you have already sent them in already, and we'll get to those later. I guess over to you first, Axel, for, I mean, we're speaking to each other virtually because of the big bad pandemic, as we all know. But this strategy was in the works right from the beginning of the von der Leyen Commission, right? We were told beforehand that there would be a big overarching strategy for transport that would link in with the Green Deal. So to what extent has this version that's been published been guided by this world that we now live in with COVID, you know, how to make transport more resilient during the recovery period and all this kind of thing? Or is it just addressing issues that we have known about for quite a while now?
No, I think so. First of all, I hope I fully understood your question, sort of linking to the Green Deal, to the strategic approach, to the pandemic, etc. Because I have some connection issues. But I think you're absolutely right, Samuel. I think from the beginning, and not only in view of the Green Deal, but also in view of the response to the Corona crisis, I think this Commission has been working very much across sectors and files. Transport is no difference. I was very happy about the last comment by Julie, because indeed, when you look into the planning that we're doing for next summer as part of the Fit for 55 package, it will be sort of the first set of initiatives to reach the 2030 ambition. We are indeed looking at a set of related initiatives together. That is the Energy Efficiency Directive, the Renewable Energy Directive, the Alternative Fuels Infrastructure Directive, or the CO2 emission performance standards. Because it is true, we have to now move the system forward, and that requires that you make that you address the interlinkages. But I think this strategy, as I said in the beginning, is not only about decarbonization. I mean, decarbonization is of course the key objectives that we need to master. But the strategy is about decarbonization. The strategy is about smart mobility, about digitalization. And coming back to your initial question, Samuel, it is about making transport more resilient in the future. I think one of the key lessons that we have learned from the way we have been addressing the impacts of the COVID crisis, which has hit the transport sector particularly hard, is we have no alternative to using and strengthening the internal market for transport. and B, we need that effective collaboration across borders. And if you look into some parts of the strategy, particularly when we think about cross-border connections in rail, and I come back to what Mr. Marinescu said in the beginning, absolutely right. We have to do much more on strengthening our rail network. We have also to do much more on strengthening our network with regard to waterborne transport, in particular inland waterways. And it is apparent that we have real issues when it comes to sort of the cross-border connections. And I think here we'll have to sort of combine that lesson that we learned in approaching the impacts of the COVID. There is no alternative to sort of a coordinated action within an internal transport market. And that also means that we have to sort of push forward priorities as part of the whole recovery stimulus that go into this direction. And to this extent, of course, the strategy is an attempt to also make its contribution to that debate.
Thank you, Axel. Catherine, you mentioned in your opening statement about how innovation and this kind of thing is going to be key to helping the maritime sector in particular become cleaner and more sustainable. And you mentioned the recovery plans as well as a real, an avenue to do that. Were you kind of disappointed then by how the European Council decided on the budget, for example, for research and innovation as part of the next multi-annual framework, where there is less money than was planned originally? Do you think that we're in an okay situation to actually tap into this innovation, or are we going to struggle in the coming years to really unlock these kind of initiatives that you were talking about, like transporting rockets across the ocean and this kind of thing?
Yeah, you probably have heard about the Starfish Mission by Pascal Lamy. It's under the Horizon Europe, and it's a very interesting mission because it takes into account all the ocean issues, maritime transport, of course, and I think, and we all have to push for this mission to be implemented. Because, for instance, we don't know if the Commission will take it into account among with the fourth other missions. So to answer your question, I think we still have to push the Commission, and you probably followed what we have voted in September in the MRV legislative text, and we asked and we voted this, for example, reduction of emissions about 40% targets by 2030, and the inclusion of maritime transport in the ETS, a zero emission at birth target by 2030, and also to finance, to help the sector in this transition. With the part of the ETS fund, we propose to create an ocean fund to help the new technologies to be developed and also to restore ecosystems. So there's not only one solution, and I fully support, think we have to promote a strategy, a maritime strategy, not only on maritime transport, but I think ocean is an opportunity for Europe. And with this, with the recovery plan, we should take, EU should take the opportunity to invest much more on ocean issues. We are speaking about mobility, but we should speak about ocean energy too, etc. And we should have port strategy also to answer to the the Chinese strategy with the sea.
Fantastic. Thank you, Catherine. Just turning to you now, Carlos, and it's actually based on a question that somebody actually asked. There seems to be a lack of one aspect of this debate with this strategy, and that is that the cleanest car is the one that isn't bought or driven, right? Like energy, the cleanest energy is the one that we don't use. Do you think that this aspect of the debate is missing, that we're talking about how to clean up cars, how to make boats better, how to make planes better, when there needs to be a discussion about, well, we shouldn't be traveling by motorized vehicle in the first place, we should be cycling, walking, etc.? Or do you think that we are starting to have this conversation more because of the coronavirus and how active mobility is, a big part of our lives now, and so on? What's your thoughts on that?
I think that, thank you, Samuel, for that question. I think it is indeed part of the conversation, but I guess it's also about where this conversation is going to take place. Because, I mean, yes, the European Commission and Europe as a whole has some important say in this topic, but it doesn't have all competencies. So what we need to do is to create the right framework to ensure that both national, regional, and local governments can push the right policies to make that either modal shift or demand management happen. And there, I'm going to say that something that it is important to keep in mind is that we need to preserve effort-sharing targets that include road transport at the national level. We also need to increase those targets as a part of increasing the target to minus 55%, because that will be a very clear driver to ensure that, again, national, regional, and local governments go in that same direction. Because the competencies, for instance, to implement low emission zones, or to establish that logistics within a certain city in a certain country need to be zero emissions, all of those competencies are not necessarily in Europe. The Commission and the European institutions as a whole need to create the right framework to make it happen. And for instance, measures like including road transport into DTS will go in the opposite direction, because it will get rid of that very important driver, which is national greenhouse gas targets. But yeah, so that conversation should be part of the debate, but we also have to be mindful of where that debate should take place, and like where and how European institutions can contribute to that debate.
Thanks, Carlos. Just turning to you, Maria, you mentioned freight and rail in particular. You said about how the Commission's targets maybe are not totally aligned with one another, how much they want to be on rail, how much they want to get from the roads. Is getting freight to be more sustainable really the key to making all of this plan work? We can put as many people as we want on high-speed trains and on zero-emission aircraft, but if all of our goods are being transported by dirty vehicles, then it's all for nothing. How important is the freight dimension to this debate?
It's very important, because a lot of a big part of the emissions is coming from the freight transport, not only from the passenger, from people transport. So we have to make this shift from road to rail, or to water.
Thanks, Maria. Yuli, turning to you, you made an excellent point about how cities are key to all of this in a way that, and the Commission strategy does go into this about how it wants carbon neutral cities and journeys between cities to be a lot cleaner. Do you see enough legislative content, shall we say, in what the EU has already agreed and what it has announced it will do in the next 12 months, 18 months, to unlock this idea of a carbon neutral city where buildings have zero emissions and have electric car infrastructure available to people? Yep. There are enough cycle paths for people and things. Or do you think that there still needs to be extra incentives basically for cities to do this, or are we in a good position?
Well, so I think Carlos mentioned before that, of course, the Commission can do certain things, but other things invariably will fall at national, regional, or even sort of local levels. And so that is the issue, of course, when it comes to cities in terms of making sure you've got the right framework in place. Having said that, I think we see also at city level a fair amount of local initiative, and I think that's very much one thing to be supported, and also something the Commission talks about in its strategy, sort of putting together, I can't remember what they call it, a toolbox, but some sort of set of instruments to help the local level implementation. And then again, I think Carlos as well, there are things talking about the strategy, but there are also other levers out there in terms of overall greenhouse gas emissions, in terms of air quality, as I mentioned before, so on and so forth, that altogether will make some of these cities move. And so, as an example, the city of Rotterdam, which of course is a huge port, the second largest in Europe, if I'm not mistaken, they are now investing, for instance, in this clean shore power. So basically being able to hook up the big ships with electric power when in docks, as part of their journey to meeting the European air quality norms. So again, I think they're again taking this sort of holistic approach to make sure that we're looking at the different perspectives, will also then in turn provide the cities with a stronger incentive to move ahead and to be front runners. I think some of the cities are doing that already. I think this document gives them more reason to do so, but for sure this is an area where we can do much more. But we're also coming from them. So it's not just top down, but also up top, if you like, the other way around.
And Carlos, I think you had a point to add what Yuli was saying.
Yeah, totally. Something that I might have forgotten in my previous intervention, that how we spend EU funds might actually make a big difference. Not only the EU budget, but also the recovery funds. If that's spent at a local level in a smart and sustainable way, and it complements the end goals of the decarbonization of transport and the economy overall, that will make a big difference. So let's make sure that whenever we have the chance, either for the Connecting Europe facility or any other tool that might end up funding transport infrastructure, that this is the right infrastructure that can make that change at a local level possible.
And Axel, what's your take on this kind of issue of cities spending money?
No, I think I can reason with much of what has been said. I mean, first of all, I think this strategy is very explicit about the relevance and the need for sustainable urban mobility, and it outlines a sort of great range of measures that show the enormous potential. Because simply speaking, the vast majority of our mobility is taking place in cities, and I think, as I see here in the panel, indeed, the well-known recognition that cities, for good reasons, are laboratories of change, and we're very happy about that. And there are things that we should do at a European level, and there are also things that we should not do at a European level, because each city is unique in its constellation and features. So I fully agree. We have always been sort of pointing to the need for pushing active modes. We have always been pointing to the needs for supporting sustainable urban mobility practices. We are in the process of reviewing our sustainable urban mobility package from 2013, and will draw sort of key conclusions on what is needed in terms of following up on the strategy later on next year. So that debate will be very important. I just wanted to flag a little bit an important point which has not been really sort of brought up in the debate so far for this transport strategy, and that is the need to look at the internalization of external cost. Because I mean, we have been using sort of regulatory instruments to push for fleet transfer and take up, and we see that these are working. I think we'll come forward also with hopefully a good proposal, and then a discussion about the needs for infrastructure. So this is all taken, but I think it is important to note that we should make use of the instruments to better address internalization of external effects. And that is not only the things that you already mentioned, Samuel. I mean, the extensions of the European emissions trading system, like the decrease of allowances for aviation, or the proposal to the forthcoming proposal to extend to maritime. But to a large extent, that is also about concrete pricing initiatives like the Eurovignette that we have been sort of debating for quite some time. And I think it's our opinion that we need to get this agreed and make use of the possibility to have, for example, road pricing helping with setting price incentives for individual transport here. Because I think we need not only a basket of measures for technology, but we also need the full basket of measures when we speak about sort of policy levers. And that again will then also help with addressing sustainable urban mobility aspects.
Thanks, Axel. I just wanted to come back to you, Yuli, about, you work for Danfoss. It's a big multinational company, so you're at the forefront of a lot of things as well. How strong a signal is something like this from the Commission, this strategy, when you see it and it has the targets in it, and a lot of them are sort of more, I would say, visions for the future rather than concrete, high-speed rail has to be doubled by the end of 2030. That's something to work towards rather than achieve. And then you have things like the CO2 targets for cars, which are concrete. If you don't meet this, then you're going to be fined. So yeah, how do you see a strategy like this? Is this we think, yes, we are along the right lines, we're going in the right direction, we can make more decisions based on this thinking, or is it more of a thing to have in the back of your mind?
So you broke up a little bit during the question, but I think you asked about how strong a signal this is for us. And I would say, as I said in my opening remarks, this is a very strong signal. Of course, this is to some extent a vision, as you like, and it needs to be then elaborated into something concrete. But for us as an industry, it's always very important to see a direction taken, because that in turn will allow us to deliver the projects that support it, right? And when we look at transport, I think it's certainly the area where we still need to develop the most in terms of technology to 2050 targets. But it is also the case that most of the technology is already there, or very close to being on the market. And so for us, this confirms a trend, it confirms a direction, and that will help us plan, and it'll help our customers plan. And with that, it sets a really important framework for the work in Europe, but also beyond. So from our perspective, and again, there are always things that could be better, but overall, it's very important for us, and it's very important for us, as I said in the beginning as well. This is holistic. It's not just road transport. It's also maritime. It's also ports. Those are our key areas. So that overall perspective, and as I said, really, really importantly, just the interlinkage with other policy levers. That for us is the key, the crux of this strategy.
Thanks, Yuli. Carlos, I wanted to come back to a point that you raised as kind of big in the news at the moment, the idea of an internal combustion ban. It isn't in the strategy. The UK has basically said it'll be in 2030. Other countries have said 2035. Norway is in a position, I guess, where we would say they'd probably de facto do it 5 years time, maybe, the way things are going. Are you of the opinion that the European Commission could actually do this from a legal point of view, or is it something that would have to be more a de facto ban through emission standards, for example? Or, talk us through your thinking on that point.
Thank you. Okay, so first of all, a small disclaimer. I'm not the expert on car regulation within the organization, and I'm aware that we are looking into that question further. But as indeed you mentioned, there are several options. You can do it in practice by increasing the standards to a level high enough that basically means phase out. But you can also do it not necessarily through car CO2 standards. You can also do it through Euro 7. If Euro 7 will be stringent enough, that could also almost translate into a de facto phase out of ICEs. I think that basically what you need to ensure is that those countries, at least in the short to medium term, that want to go faster and they cannot wait, that the Commission doesn't put stones on their way using reasons of the single market. There has been countries or regions that have announced an earlier phase out, so the Commission should be very proactive and collaborative on letting those be implemented. On the specific tool, I think that as the Climate Target Plan said, this is something that should be further explored to find the right way to do it. But indeed, we have commissioned some work, and we will come with a more detailed answer in the upcoming months.
Thanks, Carlos. Axel, maybe you could just sort of tell us a bit about where the Commission stands on this. Is there a conversation that's being had about combustion engine bans, or is it something that still needs to be elaborated through the course of the Euro 7 discussion and the carbon emissions review and so on? Where is the Commission at the moment?
Well, I think if you recall what we have been saying already in the communication on the climate target plan in September, it was clear that we said there, okay, we are setting the pathway for the transition to 2050. We are now assessing what would be required, for that particular road sector to contribute to it. And that, of course, requires also a discussion, as Carlos already indicated, at what point in time you would have a phase out of internal combustion engines. But I think we do not discuss here a concrete ban, but rather a question about the future evolution of the CO2 emission performance standards for cars and vans, and that is subject to impact assessment. It's, by the way, the same is true. I think it is premature to discuss about the Euro 7 in this, because also there sort of the assessment is going on, and as you know, the Commission is taking sort of well-founded discussions on the basis of sort of evidence also on the ratio of costs and benefits. So I think we will have a discussion with the sector at what point in time this transition will take place.
Thanks, Axel. Marianne, I wanted to ask you a question about making sure that countries are not left behind in this debate. Yesterday, 4 countries, Switzerland, Austria, Germany, and France, announced new night train connections between their networks in Europe. But Eastern Europe was rather lacking from that plan. There was nothing really east of Vienna that was included in this. So just taking that as an example, is it important to make sure that newer members of the European Union, for example, are not excluded from this vision in a way, and that they aren't left with old cars and the old planes that the Western Europe countries don't want anymore? Do you think there's a risk of that, or are those the things we can do? What do you think at that point? You're muted, Mario.
Sorry, excuse me. So it is connected with what I was saying before, because we need coordination between vehicles, doesn't matter which kind, and infrastructure. So I applaud the initiative of the four companies. I am not so optimistic what it will happen. I think it's just an announce to maybe to decrease a little bit the pressure on railway. I would applaud more an initiative to have a European e-ticket system. This would have been, I think, more efficient. 9 trains, let's see. For the moment, the night train from Vienna to Brussels is 11 hours. So let's see what it will happen. Yes, there is a danger that some member states will be left behind. That's very clear, because as I said, if you want to shift to rail, or you want 9 trains, rapid rail transport, you need rail. And in some member states, the rail is not yet at the level that would allow to make this shift. Even in also in some Western member states, there is this problem, because you don't have rail adapted for high speed everywhere. Maybe the main corridors, yes, but the comprehensive network is not yet adapted. So this is a big danger. So in my opinion, there is not yet coordination between the wishes and the real work that should be done. So 30 million cars till 2030. Okay, this is one of the, this is around 18, no, 15, 17% of the production in 10 years. Okay, that's good, zero emission. But for this, because for the moment technology, the technology that it's used is electrical technology, electrical engines. So you need infrastructure, because it's not enough to equip the, I don't know, the main roads, the core network. You need also to equip the, if you want zero emission, you need to equip also comprehensive network. The passenger arrive home with his car. On the same time, we need to speak how much energy we need, not only for transport, but also for all the other sectors. Are we prepared to deliver, to produce this energy, sustainable energy? So without emissions, and so on. There are a lot of parallel issues that should be taken in account. I don't want to speak about affordability. Okay, 30 million cars. They, you know, if you want to sell a car, you need a customer, and that means that the price should be affordable, and infrastructure adapted for that car. So I would like to see also this in parallel, these roadmaps for all these kind of things, because otherwise could be only a, you know, a slogan, and it will not be beneficial for economy. A customer should know when he's buying a car how long it will be allowed to use this car, because the technology will advance. I hope, I want this this progress, but the customer should know if you are speaking about cars. Yeah, so this is an example.
I mean, this point about customers, Axel, the point that Marianne made about ticketing. I mean, how is the Commission gonna look at that?
Thank you, Samuel. I think, Mr. Marinescu, you raised at least 3 important points, but maybe I start with the ticketing, because indeed that is, if you look into the strategy and also the accompanying action plan, I mean, that is the key action where we see, you know, by 2030, if we want to have seamless multimodal passenger transport, that will need to be facilitated also by an integrated electronic ticketing system. And you're absolutely right. I mean, that is the vision, and there are many steps to take in between getting there and where we are now. And we need to we need to address issues related to availability of data, to accessibility of data. We have to look into issues around cooperation between suppliers and vendors. I mean, principally as a transport challenge, we have an issue around interoperability of data sharing, selling arrangements. So I think this all, if you go through the 82 actions that are outlined in the action plan, I think these will all be subject to a policy discussion. And then again, one thing is what the Commission proposes, the other thing is what the European co-legislator will be doing about it. I think what you're right to say is, and I think that we will need to recognize collectively, we don't have that much time and we will need to take decisions. And I think for that thing, I think the transport strategy outlines sort of the pathway of action. Just on the point of energy and transport, I think that is really important. And you have seen that earlier this year, the Commission adopted the smart energy system integration strategy, which is of course sort of pair-to-pair with the transport strategy that we adopted today, because indeed we have to make the transition in both the transport and in the energy sector. So this is also why the Commission is proposing to take that integrated approach, bringing together the renewable energy directives, the AFID, the CO2 standard, so that we have sort of the fuels, the vehicles, and the infrastructure addressed from an integrated approach. And I think that integrated approach we have already outlined in the comprehensive analysis that we published supporting the publication on the climate target plan.
Thanks, Axel. Yuli, you look like you wanted to make a point on one thing.
I think there are so many points I'd like to make here. It's a super interesting discussion. I think on the point there about the extra energy we'll use for electric vehicles, absolutely. And I completely agree with the Commission on this. For me, the smart energy integration strategy is really the cornerstone of everything else, because that is what will tie the energy system together in a smarter way, hopefully so. And a core part of that, of course, is energy efficiency, right? Because at the end of the day, the more efficiently we can use the energy, this will need of it. So I think that's really important. The Commission has taken this sort of energy efficiently first approach. And I think it's vital we continue to do that, whether we're talking transport or buildings or anything else. But the other thing I wanted to talk about, because I mean, we're talking about sort of costs here, and we're talking sort of a burden, we're talking about just transition. But I mean, for me, and I think for Europe, the green transition, this is a growth agenda, right? I mean, there is a big upfront cost, there's no doubt about it. But what we're creating here, smart, sustainable, is that it's smart, sustainable growth, and it's jobs that are future-proof. And I think we also shouldn't forget that while there are some big upfront sort of costs, I mean, the total cost of ownership on electric vehicles, on maritime solutions, actually do already work in favor of those solutions now. And that price will go down over the years to come. So while there's no doubt about the fact that we need to fund this up now, we are already in a position where, as a private car owner, provided we get this rollout of charging, right? And by the way, what we need to do there is also make sure we incentivize sort of semi-private facilities to install charging, like supermarkets, like traction parks, like private office buildings. But then overall, we are actually on a track where also from a cost perspective, this is not just about sort of saving CO2, but also about having a more attractive solution in terms of costs.
Thanks, Yuli. Carlos, you had a point to make as well, I think.
Yeah, sure. I would like to complement what Mr. Marinescu said. I think it's actually quite relevant. I think, for instance, when we're talking about cars, consumers have been let down time after time. First, it was with diesel cars. They thought that they were buying a product that was better for the climate and for air quality and so on. And however, it was proved afterwards that it was basically a scam. Now the next Dieselgate is approaching with, for instance, plug-in hybrids, which also is a very different results, very different emissions to what the car makers advertise. And time after time, they feel that whatever product they buy, trying to make the right choices, then a scandal comes. And then basically the value of the product that they bought decreases. So in order to prevent that from happening, that's why we're claiming to have like an ICE phase out as soon as possible. Because the consumer needs to know that, okay, if I'm going to buy in 2022 a petrol car, that petrol car will not have will not have a second-hand market in an X number of years. So that type of signal is important. Just talking about 30 million cars being zero emissions by 2030 is good, but it's not enough. Consumers need clear signals of where the market is going and what value their products, the products they buy today, will have in the future.
Carlos, if I could just say, I think that's
Catherine,
very true, and that's also where consumers and companies are pretty much aligned, right? We need to know where we're going, because otherwise you can't plan accordingly.
Catherine, I wanted to ask you about maritime transport, because perhaps more than any other kind of transport, it's the one where vehicles last the longest, maybe. You know, these cargo ships last 30, 40, 50 years, maybe. So what needs to be done to basically show ship owners that in 2050 their ships need to be much cleaner, much more sustainable? You know, is now the time to really tell them, we'll give you some money, scrap your ship and buy a new hydrogen one when one's available? Or, you know, how can this work?
Excuse me, because I don't heard very good, but I understand you want me to speak about how can they reach, how can they reduce their emissions, the ship owners. I think there's a lot of things to do. First of all, they should reduce the speed. And we just spoke about the consumers, but I think consumers should consider that they could wait a little bit more. The products they bought to wait if the boats, if the ships are took 1 week more to come from China, etc. We should wait a little bit more, or the products we bought. You understand? But just for the, it's not a joke. I think we should consider to wait a little bit and to not to live in a planet without any limit, you understand? So reduce the speed, of course, put sails, and it's not, there's a lot of things to do on the engines also, and but for them to, we need to have a good vision of what will be the future. I mean, in terms, for example, of fuel, because in France, for example, they invest on NGL, but sorry, hydrogen, will it be the future for shipping, or ammoniac? I know that for the Danish ship owners, ammoniac should be the future. For the French one, it should be the hydrogen. For others, the methane. So we have to decide, I think, one solution and not several solutions, to help them to have a good vision. And to conclude, and it will be my last words, because I have to leave, sorry. I think EU have to take the leadership and not wait for the IMO to be the International Maritime Organization to push them to take the lead. So we need cooperation inside EU, and not consider that comment ça s'appelle, sorry, we need cooperation inside EU. It's not outside the EU. You understand what I mean? So, and first and finally, I think when we speak about get the target, address climate, biodiversity, leave no one behind, there's something that called the SDGs, and we need to have an integrated view of all our policies. So it's it's a message for the Commission. Thank you to everybody.
Thank you, Catherine, and thank you for joining us. We'll leave you to go back to your busy schedule. We'll start wrapping up here as well. Actually, we are a little bit over time, but we started late as well. Just one question for you, Axel, and it's this idea of what do we do with the vehicles we already have? Because I think we can all agree that the strategy released today is rather good on new vehicles. So do we really need to start thinking about things like these cash for clunker schemes for planes and boats and cars and trucks to get these old cars and vehicles out of the system so that we can bring in new ones? Or is that going to happen naturally anyway if we have this framework in place?
Look, I think we have principally two sets of policy instruments addressing the two parts of the sort of emission system from let's take road transport vehicles as an example. I mean, you have the CO2 standards that address the sales of new vehicles, but then we also have the renewable energy directive, also still the fuel quality directives that address sort of the uptake of overall renewable transport fuels, respectively road transport emissions. And I think as you will see from the analysis that is underpinning the transport strategy, it is obvious that while we need to push for an accelerated uptake of new vehicles, we also need to address emissions from the remaining fleet. Because, take the example again of the 13 million zero emission cars for 2030 and put it in relation to, I think we have around 239 million cars on the road at the moment, if I'm not mistaken. Don't quote me on that figure. But so I think there's also continued action through levers such as the Renewable Energy Directive to address renewable low carbon transport fuels, for aviation, for waterborne, and also for road transport.
Many thanks. Thank you, Axel. Just as we start wrapping up here, I guess I turn to you, Yuli, to sort of give us an idea of, with this strategy, what's the one thing that you think needs to be got right from it in order for us to start thinking about meeting our climate neutrality goals and Paris Agreement and better air pollution and all this kind of thing? What's the one thing that stands out for you, if you can pick one, of course?
I mean, I think it's difficult to pick one, so I'll pick two. So I think the overarching point is this point around the cities, actually, because a lot flows from that, from my perspective, because that will drive the EV, that will drive the ports, and in turn also the short-term maritime. And there's the really short-term thing we really need to get right, and we've all talked about it in different ways, is the rollout of the charging infrastructure, because we're not going to get consumers to buy electric vehicles if they don't feel certain that they can charge them fast and reliably where they need to. So I think that's a bit that the Commission already highlighted back in March. I think that's a bit that ties in with the recovery, and that is where we can really push right now to push to a trend we're already seeing in terms of EV uptake, and that will make a big difference quickly. And will pave the way for a lot of the rest, I think. And I think the more Commission can do to also work with urban authorities, the better. I like all the ideas about sort of toolkits, supportive structures, so on and so forth. I think that's the way to go.
Fantastic. Thank you, Yuli. Marianne, what's the one thing from this Commission strategy that you really think they get right? To end on an optimistic note, what's the one thing you're pleased to see?
Yes, I didn't understand very well the question because you have a problem with the sound, but what should I want from this strategy?
What's the one thing that you think is good that the Commission gets right?
I think that the intention is good. Yeah, that's very clear. It's what we want, at least what I want also, yes, to go to decarbonization. But I would like generally from the Commission to see aside all the collateral actions that should be done in order to reach a target. If you say that we double the high-speed rail in, I don't know, 2030, I think, or whatever, yeah? That means that we need these investments. These are the rails that should be done in order to have a system, and all the other things in order to see what is the need in the future. Need of everything. This is the number of jobs that we lose, but we create in the same time, and so on. I think this would be the best way to make a projection for the future, because otherwise, I think that it will be a collection of targets, and when we shall put everything together, we shall realize that something is missing somewhere, is lacking somewhere. And then I come back to your question. In the same time, we should see how is this applying for all member states. If somewhere somebody will be left behind because will not be able to go in the same path as the others.
Thank you, Marianne. And Carlos, to round us off before we end off, it's 2020. What are the main thing that we have to be careful about over the next 10 years as we try to decarbonize transport? Where can we avoid mistakes that we've made before?
That's indeed a good question, and I think there is a good number of examples of things that we did wrong, and we should learn from our mistakes at the European level. Biofuels being one of them. Another one being the use of natural gas for transport, for any mean of transport, either LNG for ships or CNG for cars or LNG for trucks. We really should not promote any of those false solutions in the decade to come, because we have no time to waste. There is no time for false solutions. We really need to invest and send the right signal on where we need to go. Things like a clear phase-out date for internal combustion engines, to send a clear message that we need like green hydrogen-based fuels for aviation and shipping, so companies and citizens can take the right decisions in the years to come.
Many thanks. Thank you so much, Carlos. And thank you to all of you as well, Yuli, Marianne, Axel. It's such a broad subject, and it seems like it would really lend itself more to a face-to-face discussion. And it's a shame we only have an hour and a bit, really, but hopefully soon we can rectify that and have a more in-depth conversation about these things. My thanks to all of you for joining us, and to all of you out there in the audience, thank you for sticking with us and tweeting along and sticking with the coverage on the transport that we bring you. We're going to do our best to bring you more of that in this week on this strategy. It's a huge document to get our teeth into, so look out for that online, and stick with us in terms of events as well. We have more of them coming up, and it's going to be on a whole range of issues, including energy, transport, agriculture, digital, and so on. And thank you very much. And if I don't see you beforehand, a Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to all of you. And thank you for tuning in. And we'll see you again next time.